The vast expanse of space lay still, as it always had, dark and silent. But today, something was different. A massive shadow moved across the heavens, large enough to block out stars. It was a fleet, an invasion fleet, unlike anything Earth had ever witnessed. The Xorvian Empire, a ruthless and war-hungry alien race, had set their sights on Earth. This was their pattern: destroy, conquer, claim. And Earth, a young, peaceful planet, was their next target. The first signs were subtle. A few weeks ago, an anomaly in the solar system had been detected, a strange shift in the movement of asteroids. But the scientists dismissed it at first as a mistake. Maybe a stray comet, they said, but then came the signals. A low-frequency pulse, encoded in a pattern so complex that even the best human algorithms couldn't decipher it at first. It was a warning, but the world didn't know it yet. The authorities didn't even have time to fully investigate before the real danger arrived. One morning, without warning, the Xorvian fleet appeared, unseen, undetected, at the outer edge of the solar system. Earth's best telescopes, so focused on the stars, had missed the massive ships hidden in the shadow of a distant planet. It was only when they were within striking distance of Mars that Earth's defense systems finally recognized the threat. The fleet was enormous. Dozens of ships, each the size of small moons, lined up like an unstoppable armada. The Xorvians had no intention of sneaking in. They came to show their power. They made no attempt to communicate, no demands, no requests for peace. The invasion was already underway. Their ships hovered in the vastness of space like dark titans, their glowing engines casting an eerie light across the black sky. On Earth, chaos erupted. The world's most advanced military commanders gathered in a hastily assembled crisis meeting. Satellites flashed warning signals, emergency alarms blared across the globe, and every military base on the planet went into full lockdown. Leaders and generals scrambled to make sense of what was happening. No one had ever seen a force like this. No one could comprehend the scale of the attack. At the United Nations headquarters, President Maria Alvarez addressed the world with grim certainty. Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. "We are facing an invasion," she said, her words heavy. "The Xorvian Empire is real, and it is here. They have come to destroy us. We must fight back. We must stand united." Yet, as she spoke, doubt lingered in her mind. The Xorvians were not just any alien species. They were an empire built on conquest. Their technology far surpassed anything humanity had ever developed. They had destroyed countless worlds before Earth had even fully mastered space travel. What chance did humanity have against such overwhelming force? Across the planet, the military scrambled to prepare. Earth had weapons. Of course they did, but they were nothing compared to the advanced technology of the Xorvian fleet. Earth's missiles could barely scratch the surface of the invaders' ships. The aliens had energy shields, weapons that could reduce entire cities to ash in a single blast. Earth's defense systems, designed to fend off small-scale attacks, were woefully unprepared for an enemy this powerful. Meanwhile, on the darkened bridge of the Xorvian flagship, Commander Korek stood with a cruel smile on his face. He watched as the human planet came into view. Its blue oceans and green continents, a stark contrast to the cold darkness of space. His mind was set. Earth was just another prize in a long list of conquered worlds. The humans were primitive, weak, and easy to crush. "The humans will not know what hit them," Korek muttered to his officers. His voice was low, but filled with dark satisfaction. "Their weapons will be useless against us. Prepare for their destruction." The ships moved in closer, the lead ship sending a clear message to Earth: surrender or face obliteration. It was clear that the Xorvians had no interest in diplomacy, no interest in negotiation. They wanted the planet, and they were going to take it. Back on Earth, the panic was palpable. The Xorvian fleet had already started to position themselves, taking advantage of Earth's weak defenses. Cities were being evacuated. Emergency protocols were enacted. But there was a sense of helplessness in the air. This wasn't just another military conflict. This was an extinction-level event. Earth's military was outmatched, outgunned, and out of time. In the command center of Earth's Global Defense Force, General Mason Blackwood slammed his fist on the table in frustration. "We need more time," he said. "We're not ready for this. We're nowhere near ready. Those ships, they're too advanced. We need to buy time," President Alvarez said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if the weight of the situation was beginning to sink in. "There's got to be something we can do, something we've missed." "Maybe there is," Blackwood said, his mind racing. "We need to think beyond weapons and shields. What if there's something we can use to turn the tide?" The minutes ticked by like hours. The Xorvian fleet continued to draw closer, their weapons ready to unleash. Earth was on the brink of collapse, and yet a glimmer of hope remained, a hope that one small group of scientists, engineers, and military strategists might hold the key to saving the planet. But for now, that hope was buried in secrets only a handful of people knew about, and time was running out to unlock them. The tension on Earth grew by the minute. Humanity had always been confident in its ability to adapt. But now, with an alien armada on the doorstep of their home, all that confidence seemed misplaced. Across the globe, the defense systems were activated, and the world's best military minds were locked in urgent meetings. Yet, no matter how much technology they threw at the problem, nothing seemed capable of halting the impending doom. Inside the command center, General Mason Blackwood paced restlessly. His brow was furrowed in concentration as he watched the live feed of the Xorvian fleet moving steadily closer to Earth. "This is insane. Their weapons are unlike anything we've seen. We've barely dented their shields with everything we've thrown at them," he muttered under his breath, hands gripping the edge of the table. The last few hours had been a blur of frantic planning, simulations, and the stark reality that their planet was about to be wiped from existence. President Maria Alvarez, calm despite the rising pressure, stood at the center of the room. "We need something more. The Xorvians are confident, yes, but they've underestimated us. We're not going down without a fight." Her words were resolute, but in the pit of her stomach, doubt gnawed at her. What if the aliens didn't underestimate them? What if they were already calculating humanity's every move? Every hour that passed, the Earth seemed less and less likely to survive. They had one advantage: time. The Xorvian fleet hadn't yet launched their full attack. They were still in the outer reaches of the solar system, still waiting. There was a chance to act. As the generals and scientists continued their work, Dr. Blake Foster, a senior researcher and head of Project Titan, sat at a terminal off to the side, his face illuminated by the glow of several screens. His hands moved quickly over the keyboard, inputting data and analyzing patterns. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find the answer. They had the defense systems, but they weren't enough. Earth's military technology simply wasn't advanced enough to match the Xorvian Empire. It was then that something caught his eye: an anomaly in the alien fleet's communication. The Xorvian ships were organized, coordinated, but there was a faint signal buried within the chaos of their encrypted frequencies. Something strange, something human. It was a glitch, but the more Blake analyzed it, the more he began to suspect that it wasn't a glitch at all. "President Alvarez," Blake called out, breaking from his thoughts. His voice was sharp with urgency. She walked over, joining him by the terminal. "What is it?" Alvarez asked, her eyes scanning the screen for any sign of hope. "I think I found something," Blake said, his voice steady but filled with excitement. This is a backdoor. It's a communication protocol, hidden inside the Xorvian frequencies. It's almost like they're trying to send us a message." "A message?" General Blackwood raised an eyebrow. "From the invaders." Blake nodded. "It's possible. The Xorvian fleet uses highly encrypted, nearly uncrackable systems, But this signal isn't like the others. It's human. Alvarez frowned. Human. Are you sure? Yes, Blake confirmed, leaning closer to the screen. It's an old military encryption from Earth's past, one of the last secret projects we ran before we focused entirely on conventional warfare. It hasn't been used in decades, but it's still there, buried deep within our systems. The Corvians must have accidentally activated it. For a moment, the room fell silent as the weight of Blake's words sank in. If the Corvians had somehow stumbled upon this secret military project, they would have no idea what it meant. Humanity had used this backdoor in the past to disrupt enemy communications, to take control of fleets, systems they thought were completely secure. President Alvarez's face hardened. This is it, she said, her eyes meeting Blake's. If we can reverse engineer this signal, we might be able to hack into their communications, shut down their systems, and break their fleet's coordination. But we need to move fast. We don't have much time before they begin their assault. The urgency of the situation intensified. Blake and his team immediately set to work, sifting through the ancient systems and refining the signal. But it was risky. This backdoor was old, outdated, and no one had used it in years. There were no guarantees it would still work, especially against an alien force that had advanced technology far beyond anything humanity could imagine. As the hours ticked by, General Blackwood continued to oversee the planetary defense systems, organizing the remaining human forces. But his mind was also on Project Titan, the secret weapon that humanity had hoped they would never have to use. It had been designed to combat an invasion just like this, an alien force with overwhelming firepower and technology. But now, as Blake's team worked on the Corvian signal, the timeline for activating Project Titan was growing shorter. Outside, the skies darkened as the Corvian fleet approached Earth's atmosphere. The clock was ticking. They had no choice now but to gamble everything on a signal, a backdoor that could either save them or doom them all. President Alvarez stepped to the front of the room, looking out the large windows that offered a panoramic view of the planet's surface. The cities were already beginning to evacuate, people fleeing to shelters as the final hour approached. Humanity has survived worse, she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. We will not fall without a fight. Blake's fingers flew over the keys as he cracked the last layer of the encrypted signal. The room was tense, every person on edge as they waited for the results. Suddenly, a sharp beep echoed in the silence. "We're in," Blake said, his voice tense with excitement. "I've gained access to their fleet communications." The room erupted in a mixture of disbelief and relief, but the victory was only momentary. Now, they had to act fast. They had gained an advantage, but the battle had only just begun. The tension in the command center was palpable. The entire world's future hung on the narrow edge of a knife. Blake's fingers hovered over the keyboard as the data streamed in, faster than he could process. He had cracked into the Corvian fleet's communication network, but now came the real challenge: using the stolen signal to gain control of their systems without alerting the enemy. It was a delicate operation. One wrong move, and they would risk tipping off the invaders that Earth had managed to infiltrate their network. "Blake, how much longer?" President Maria Alvarez asked, her voice steady, but tinged with desperation. She stood at the front of the room, her eyes fixed on the countdown timer displayed on the holographic screen. The Corvian fleet was less than an hour away from striking Earth, and every second counted. Blake didn't look up from his screen, his concentration absolute. "I'm in, but it's more complicated than we thought. The Corvian systems are built on layers of security we couldn't even have imagined. They're not just trying to invade our world. They've prepared for the worst. I have to thread a needle here." General Mason Blackwood paced behind him, his jaw clenched. "Just make sure you do it quickly, Blake. We don't have much time before they start their assault." The room fell into silence once more, the only sound being the faint hum of machines and the rapid clicks of Blake's keyboard. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. Everyone in the room, military leaders and civilian officials alike, knew that humanity's chances of survival rested entirely on this next move. It was the kind of high-stakes gamble that no one had ever hoped to face. But here they were, standing on the edge of a precipice. Meanwhile, the Xorvian fleet remained eerily silent in the distance, as though they were waiting for the final moment before unleashing their full might. They had made no attempt to communicate, no demands, no threats, just a quiet, deliberate approach. But humanity had no illusions. The Xorvians' primary goal was clear: annihilation. The alien commander, General Korak, stood aboard his flagship, watching the blue planet below through the massive viewport. His face was impassive, but beneath his cold exterior, he could feel the simmering anticipation of conquest. Earth was about to fall, just like all the other worlds before it. They had underestimated the humans in the past, but he had seen the signs. The humans were clever, resilient, and resourceful. That was why he had waited until now to strike. Commander Korak, one of his subordinates, said, stepping forward, "We're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's encoded. Should we respond?" Korak didn't even glance at the officer. His eyes were locked on Earth. Ignore it. Let them waste their time. We're not here to talk. We're here to conquer. As Korak turned back to the vast expanse of space, the final preparations for the invasion began. But unbeknownst to him, Blake was making progress. "I found a vulnerability," Blake announced suddenly, his voice cutting through the silence. "It's their battle coordination system. If we can take control of that, we can disrupt the entire fleet. We can slow them down, scatter them, maybe even get them to fire on each other." Alvarez's eyes widened. "Can you do it in time?" "I can," Blake said, the edges of his voice sharpening with confidence. "But we need to make sure no one catches on. I'm going to send a signal, a false order to the fleet. If it works, they'll think it's from their own commanders. I'll get them to engage each other, creating confusion." General Blackwood leaned in, his voice low and commanding. "Do it. We can't waste any more time." Blake nodded and began typing rapidly. The next few moments would either be humanity's salvation or their undoing. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he initiated the sequence to send the false command. He had studied the Xorvian fleet's command protocols, a dangerous task in itself, but it was the only chance they had. If the signal was successful, the Xorvian fleet would believe they were under attack from within. The chaos that would follow could give Earth's remaining forces the opening they needed. "False command initiated," Blake muttered under his breath. He hesitated for a fraction of a second before pressing the final key. The message would now travel across light years of space, reaching the heart of the Xorvian fleet. Outside, the first signs of battle began. The Xorvian fleet was nearing Earth's atmosphere, and their massive weapons, capable of turning cities into smoldering craters, began to power up. The world watched in fear as Earth's cities were targeted by alien ships. As the first Xorvian warship unleashed a beam of intense energy toward a major capital city, the skies lit up with explosions, and sirens wailed across the globe. Back inside the command center, Blake's fingers hovered above the keys as he watched the incoming feedback. The false signal had been sent. Now, all they could do was wait and hope. The seconds felt like minutes. The room was deathly quiet as every person present watched the status reports on their screens. Suddenly, the first signs of confusion appeared. Xorvian fleet communication channels buzzed with activity. Ships began to break formation. Some started to change their course. Others hesitated, confused by the sudden change in orders. Blake's eyes narrowed. The signal was working. "We've got them," he said under his breath, but his victory was short-lived. The fleet's response was more complex than he had anticipated. They were fighting back. Korak was not a fool. He noticed the disruptions immediately. His officers scrambled to regain control. "What is this?" he roared, slamming his fist on the console. "Who dares disrupt our fleet?" The humans had made their move, But now it was time for the Xorvian fleet to retaliate. The invaders had underestimated Earth, but they were far from finished. The stage was set for a fight that would determine the fate of humanity, and the Xorvians weren't going to give up without showing their might. Back on Earth, Blake looked grim as the room filled with urgent reports. "They're recovering. Fast," he said, his voice thick with realization. "We don't have much time before they adapt." The situation on Earth had reached a boiling point. The brief moment of confusion within the Xorvian fleet had given humanity a sliver of hope, but it wasn't enough. The invaders were regrouping, adapting faster than anyone had anticipated. Their ships, previously thrown into disarray by the fake command Blake had sent, were now moving with a deadly precision. General Korak was no fool. He knew exactly what had happened. He'd underestimated humanity once before, and now, as his fleet recovered from the temporary setback, he wasn't going to make the same mistake again. On Earth, every military resource that could be spared was thrown into the defense efforts. The planetary defense shields were activated to their maximum potential, but even those were beginning to buckle under the pressure. The Xorvian warships were overwhelming in their size and power, and the reality of humanity's situation was starting to settle in. Time was running out. Inside the command center, the urgency was palpable. President Alvarez stood at the front, her eyes fixed on the giant holographic display, showing the movements of the Xorvian fleet. The reports were coming in fast and furious, each one more grim than the last. The Xorvian ships were closing in. The destruction they had already wrought on Earth's cities was only the beginning. Blake's hands shook as he sat at his terminal. He had done everything he could. He'd infiltrated their systems, caused confusion, but now the enemy was adapting. They were back on track. The fleeting advantage they had gained was slipping away. "We need to act now," General Blackwood barked. His voice was tight with frustration. The time for slow, calculated strategies had passed. Now it was all about survival. "We're running out of time," Alvarez said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "What's the status on Project Titan?" Blake paused, looking up from his screen, his face drawn. The project, an experimental weapon developed in secret for situations just like this, was humanity's last resort. It had been designed to counter a threat far greater than any individual fleet, but no one had ever hoped to deploy it. It was too risky, too unpredictable. But now there was no choice. "Project Titan is ready," Blake said, his voice firm, though a hint of doubt lingered in his eyes. "But it requires a launch from the Mars orbital station. The problem is, it takes time to activate the weapon. And the Xorvians are already here. We don't have the luxury of time." Alvarez and Blackwood exchanged a look. "Activated anyway," Alvarez said. "We've got nothing left to lose." General Blackwood nodded sharply, turning to the officers who had been working tirelessly in the background. "Prepare the Titan for launch. Now." As the orders were relayed, Blake turned back to his terminal, bringing up the interface for Project Titan. The system's vast complexity filled the screen, and Blake couldn't help but feel a flicker of doubt. They were betting everything on this weapon, and if it failed, there would be nothing left. He took a deep breath and began entering the commands, his fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. Meanwhile, the Xorvian fleet continued its advance. Korak's flagship, the Severing Wrath, led the charge. His warships began to position themselves around Earth's atmosphere, forming a deadly blockade. They were moments away from initiating the final strike. It would be the end for humanity. Then, a sudden rumble shook the command center. The floor trembled beneath their feet. A warning alarm blared across the room. "What was that?" General Blackwood demanded. Blake's eyes went wide as he watched the data pour in. It's Project Titan. It's been activated." A flash of light lit up the sky as Project Titan, a colossal weapon of unimaginable power, fired from its launch station on Mars. The beam of energy shot across space at near light speed, streaking toward Earth. For a moment, it seemed like time itself had frozen. And then, the Earth trembled again as the weapon impacted. But the response from the Xorvian fleet was not what anyone had expected. The energy from Project Titan collided with the lead ship of the Xorvian Armada, and the explosion was unlike anything Earth had ever seen. A massive shockwave rippled through space, tearing apart the Xorvian flagship and several surrounding vessels. The blast was so powerful that even the Xorvian fleet itself seemed stunned for a moment. However, the battle wasn't over yet. The destruction was catastrophic, but the Xorvian fleet was still formidable. Korak's flagship had been obliterated, but the remaining ships immediately went into full retreat mode, attempting to regroup and reassess. The Xorvian Empire had seen defeat, but they would not take it lying down. President Alvarez watched in awe as the first victory for humanity unfolded before her eyes. The Xorvian fleet, for all its might, was reeling. But Blake, still focused on his screen, didn't let himself celebrate just yet. "We've made a dent," he said, his voice low. "But they're not giving up. They'll regroup, and we need to be ready for their counterattack." The room fell into a tense silence as everyone processed the gravity of the situation. The Xorvian fleet had been wounded, but the war was far from over. Then, just as it seemed like Earth had a moment to breathe, the emergency communications channel buzzed. A message coming through from the heart of the Xorvian Armada. The message was short, but its meaning was clear, and it left everyone in the room frozen in place. "We will return." The voice of General Korak rang out, cold and vengeful, "and when we do, we will have no mercy." The transmission ended, and though Earth had won a battle, it was clear that the war was far from over.